Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, sharing some insights with you today. So today's video is going to be just a bit of an overall kind of summary of the planetary energies for the month of June. Today is the 1st of June, 2018. So where I'd like to begin actually is we've just come out of a full moon in Sagittarius, and prior to that, last month on the 15th of May, we had a new moon in Taurus. And this month on the 14th of June, we're going to have a new moon in Gemini. Now, the thing that I think is important to always address is that if you want to follow themes that are opening up, that are taking place through your own birth chart as a result of the planets transiting around, including the moon, Coco, you always need to look at, where does this full moon land in your birth chart? Where does this new moon land in your birth chart? Because its location in your birth chart is what is going to potentially give you some kind of meaning as to what this particular full or new moon is bringing for you. Now, some people may not have a birth time, so that's a bit of an issue because there's no way around that. So you have to work with the full moon, new moon energies, I guess, in a different way. That's another story. I won't really unpack that now. Let's just go back to the full moon in Sagittarius that we just had. Because it was in Sagittarius, there was a lot of messages that came out. I noticed just hearing, different people's takes and perspective on the full moon. Because it was in Sagittarius, it had a real sort of positive spin on it, because Sagittarius is generally the archetype that we connect with optimism, expansion, truth-seeking, confidence, and generally a feel-good type of energy. It's an energy that allows us to expand and express and experience other dimensions, even, you could say, because it's the ninth house. It's the right brain. It's the energy that enables us to connect to our right brain intuition and to expand our consciousness, really. So for those reasons, when you unpack a full moon in Sagittarius, it has a really lovely archetypal feel and energy about it. There's no question about that. And to a degree, that energy would have been present. However, it is also important to recognize and address that this full moon we just had a couple of days ago was, well, the sun in the full moon, because the full moon, just to remind ourselves, the full moon is always opposite the sun in the chart. So it's a polarity point and an axis of two energies. So the moon was in Sag, the sun was in Gemini. Now, in that opposition, the transiting planet of Saturn, which is in Capricorn, was forming what's called a quincunx aspect to the sun. That's not an easy energy. Okay, it's not life-threatening or anything like that, but it is an energy that requires some kind of adjustment process that's actually quite awkward and not comfortable, not easy. It can also point to needing to readjust and let go of something altogether. So this full moon had an energy about it with relation to Saturn squaring quincunx the sun, that would have brought up some kind of irritation or some kind of adjustment that would have needed to happen for you. Now, in order to get more of a story of, where that showed up for you, naturally you need to know where this sun-moon polarity full moon was in your birth chart. Where was the sun moon in your birth chart? In their opposition, they'd be across where Sagittarius and Gemini is for you in your birth chart. So just very quickly, you know, if you're looking at the full moon in Sagittarius in your birth chart, say it lands in the 7th house, for example, what you would need to do is not only look at the full moon in Sagittarius in your 7th house, but you would look at the ruler of your 7th house. And does the ruler of your 7th house form some kind of relationship to this full moon? If it does, that adds more layers, more intensity, more volume, more energy to this full moon for you. In addition to that, was this full moon in Sagittarius conjunct something in your 7th house, or was it opposite something in your 1st house? So when it comes to full moons, new moons, the two major aspects that I consider are the conjunction and the opposition. They seem to be the aspects that show up the most with regards to drawing energies in and being part of the new moon or full moon, the story of what that full moon and new moon is representing. So, as I said, the sun was receiving quincunx from Saturn, which indicated some kind of irritation, some kind of awkward situation that required an adjustment. Now, I can't be more specific than that because I don't know where this full moon in Sagittarius was for you in your birth chart. So this is where you need to now take this information and have a look at your own birth chart if you already haven't. Again, this is a way of learning. I mean, my purpose of actually doing these videos is not just about doing a monthly update for the general person interested in getting some quick fix, some quick update. It's also about trying to integrate as much as I can some methods or concepts about how to work with this. I know that there are a lot of people out there that just want an update. They don't want to look into their chart and look at this and look at that and look at the ruler and look at what was conjunct and opposite. And I appreciate that and respect that. So for those who want something different to that, there's plenty of people out there doing astrology or tarot readings that offer that kind of service that maybe somebody's looking for. My service or my offering is different because I do like to give updates about what we're currently standing in, what we're feeling, what we're struggling with, what we're embracing, what's conflicting, what's challenging, all of those things. But I want to give some kind of scope of or platform of how do I derive to those meanings and how can you then apply that into your own birth chart. So for those of you that are interested in understanding astrology from a deeper level and from a level that you may be studying it or just wanting to learn more, then this is the platform for you because this is what I do in my presentations. The other thing about this full moon in Sagittarius is that I've bought a mic, by the way, guys, and it's right here, that little black thing you can see on the left-hand side. And I only just bought it, and it wasn't cheap. And I want to test it. So I'd really love some feedback in relation to the quality, if it's improved the quality of the sound, because if it hasn't, I need to return it and try and find something that's more suitable. So thank you to the person who wrote a message underneath my previous video saying, can you please get a mic? And I have had that request previously. I appreciate that sometimes it is difficult. The audio plays up a bit, and quite aside from the fact that I didn't have a mic, it's also that I live in a very busy area in the city that I live in, and there's just really not much I can do about that. Okay, so back to this full moon in Sagittarius. The other major feature, which is probably an even more important feature, more significant, is the fact that the full moon in Sagittarius is involved in what we call T-square in astrology. The T-square is It literally looks like a T because what you have is two planets opposite each other, which we had the sun and the moon opposite each other, which is what forms the full moon. And if you draw a line between those two planets and take it right in the middle, there's a third planet there. That third planet is the planet that forms the T-square. Basically forms a square to both the planets in the opposition, in this case the sun and the moon. Now the planet that was forming the T-square was Neptune, because the sun was in Gemini, moon was in Sagittarius, and transiting Neptune is in Pisces. So Pisces is square to Sagittarius and is also square to Gemini, hence this T-square pattern theme that we had during this full moon, or as part of what full moon brought up. Now, let me be clear. T-squares are something that are frequently found in many people's charts, and they have to be, in my opinion, a very, very telling aspect pattern that brings up something that's really, really very, very challenging for the individual. Very briefly put, without analysing the whole understanding of the T-square, but very simply put, what we're actually working with is the third planet that forms the T-square is the planet that is the problem to those two planets opposing each other, whilst at the same time it's also the planet that's going to ultimately find the resolution and healing point, if you like. But to get to that point for the third planet, which forms T-square, which is called the apex planet, by the way, the apex planet is the problem and the solution at the same time. So it can take years for people, you know, to work with that T-square energy and to resolve it. So it's not an easy pattern, is what I'm trying to bring across. And I just, by the way, if you're serious about astrology and you don't have this book, I recommend this book very highly. I've had this book probably about 20 years now. It's really one of the best books written on aspects. There are others as well, definitely, that are great, but this particular one is fantastic. And Bill Tierney he's a great astrologer, and he really knows his stuff. This book is easy to understand, easy to read, and very powerful, and very specific as well. So to give you an example of this full moon in Sagittarius that we just had, because I personally, for me, this full moon brought up a lot of stuff which were not easy. It was very, very, a very intense full moon for me, because it triggered off certain things in my chart with other transiting energies at the moment. So anyway, that's another story. But the reason this full moon in Sagittarius hasn't been easy is because of this, in my opinion. So Neptune was affecting this full moon, okay? And it was affecting it through, as I said, what's called a T-square. Now, this is what Bill Tierney has to say about Neptune being the apex planet. I've just explained to you what the apex planet is and where it's located. So just again, very briefly, a T-square is two planets opposite each other with a third planet directly below the two planets in the midpoint, which forms a square to both those planets, okay? That planet down there is the planet that is known as the apex planet. So he's got quite a few things to say. I'm not sure I'll read all of it because it might take a little while, but this is just a bit of a taste to give you an idea of what this full moon carried with it, along with, look, there's no question about it, it carried the Sagittarius meaning, archetypal meaning, which is about truth, seeking truth, expanding, optimism, you know, a sort of feel-good energy, uplifting energy. It carried that with it as well. But unfortunately, because of this T-square, it complicated this energy, and I think it's created probably some confusion for some people, and perhaps brought about some situation where the person was somewhat disillusioned about something in their life. And the two, I mean, Sagittarius and Gemini are both communicators, in the sense where, you know, Gemini is the left brain. It's the day-to-day sort of language that we use to basically communicate and articulate, you know, our thoughts. And the Sagittarius component is that right brain intuition, higher visionary component of our mind, which seeks to find meaning and purpose and truth and expansion and deeper and greater understanding in what it is we're trying to understand, articulate, share, express, and so forth. So those two signs are very much about expressing our ideas, just coming from very different points of reference, or very different platforms within our own selves, because, as I said, Gemini is the everyday kind of language communication level and skills that we use, and Sagittarius is the philosophical, esoteric, you could say spiritual, astrological, symbolic language, higher learning, higher mind, intuition, all those things. So there's something about that full moon, in other words, that carried with it a message that came through, that because of the T-square created some complications or some sense of disillusionment or disappointment, or even a sense of sadness or pain. Okay, so here's what Bill Tini says about the apex Neptune. Apex Neptune indicates, now, by the way, just sorry, before I read this is referring to if a planet was, if a person was born with a T-square in their birth chart and Neptune was the apex planet, this is a pattern that is inherent within the birth chart, therefore within the person's life, and therefore something that carries into their story, into their being, and something that they are working through, resolving through, and so forth. So whilst this is generally an interpretation that we might really find very useful when we see a T-square in a person's birth chart, the fact is that this full moon chart that we're talking about, which is the full moon in Sagittarius, somebody was born on that day, a couple of days ago, where, or many people who were born that day, in fact, where they'll have that T-square, that full moon, they were born during a full moon in Sag, which has that T-square to Neptune. Therefore, that pattern is something that is inherent in their birth chart, in their story, okay? Now, in the way that we're discussing it here today is not in the same way, because what we are talking about is simply the full moon that we had a couple of days ago, and what the energies connecting to that full moon could have brought up, okay? So just need to make that distinction, because this is pretty detailed and pretty thorough, what he says, and it might be hard to find all of this in a space of just a day or two when we had the full moon. But bear in mind that full moon has an energy before it gets to full, and it equally has an energy as it starts to disseminate from full to its subsequent cycles, phases. That's the word I was looking for. So Neptune, apex Neptune indicates an individual who is hypersensitive. So this is the key word with this particular full moon. There was an incredible hypersensitivity with this full moon, which would have affected a lot of people, I suspect, particularly if this full moon landed in your birth chart somewhere that triggered off certain things, okay, via aspect and so forth. So hypersensitive to all sensory and stimuli, and is able to experience almost boundless emotional states of consciousness. Normally, he's highly refined sensibilities and is prone towards being deeply inspired on the feeling level. That's all the Neptune. Yet his delicate inner nature, again is Neptune, can lack the ego structure. That's totally Neptune. Neptune has no ego structure whatsoever. enabling him to cope with the ordinary rigors of mundane life. Mundane life and Neptune are worlds apart. They are two different worlds altogether. Mundane life is Saturn. And anything outside of mundane life that takes you within into the inner life, the soul life, spiritual life, is Neptune. A place that has no boundaries and no limitations is Neptune and Jupiter, you could say. Okay. So yet, I'll just repeat that. Yet his delicate inner nature can lack the ego structure, enabling him to cope with the ordinary rigors of mundane life. Dealing with practical realities may seem too demanding and unfulfilling to him. Something about this full moon that brings all this up. With two squares from Neptune, which is what I discussed, this full moon, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sag, Neptune down the bottom, forming a square to both those planets. Involved in this tenacious configuration, the tendency towards self-deception and escapism is emphasized. So there's something about deception and wanting to escape, or confusion in messages, either your own, the ones that you have internally or internalized, and ones that you're getting from out there, maybe from a particular person or persons. Self-deception and escapism is emphasized. Escapism is to do with Neptune, purely and simply. Deception can also have to do with Neptune. It can also have to do with other planets as well, but it certainly is very much connected to Neptune, not because Neptune is deceptive, simply because Neptune's energy doesn't easily translate into the practical, linear, methodical, left brain way of communicating and expressing. It can distort things, create confusion, and therefore appear to create some kind of deception or illusion or disillusionment. There are usually hidden psychological weaknesses or blind spots. So that's another strong theme, you could say, or key component to understanding this full moon. Something about now Neptune is blind spots because, Neptune doesn't project in the way we normally project things from our psyche and other levels. Neptune can be quite distorted, and it also absorbs as well. It doesn't push out, it more or less sort of draws into itself. Neptune and the moon both do that, by the way. So there are usually hidden psychological weaknesses or blind spots that must be faced objectively and analysed if this individual is to ever clarify his needs in partnership. Okay, so that's an important key component too. His natural inclination is to cloud and colour his perception of others in an over-idealistic manner due to his reluctance to accept human imperfection. That's Neptune. Perfection is Virgo, or a desire to be perfect at least, and imperfection is also Virgo. Virgo Pisces, that axis is about perfection, imperfection, chaos and order. The realization of inadequacy in others he attracts makes him become painfully sensitive to his own human frailties. Very sensitive energy, this Neptune squaring this full moon, brought up a lot of things for people. And he unrealistically attempts to protect himself from such awareness through denying their existence. So there's some sense of suppressing this energy and really struggling to acknowledge and address and look at, honestly and clearly what it is that's going on. So the energy is internalized, suppressed, and kind of remains in a bit of a fog kind of state. Neptune being fogged. He's apt to defend himself from the threat of harsh reality by distorting whatever filters through his emotions. again, you know, that's very, very powerful, because what's that? That essentially is saying that this 3D reality has such a harsh component to it, and a Neptunian type of person, a Piscean person, a 12th house person, this Neptune T-square to this full moon brings up this hypersensitivity, as I said at the very beginning of this paragraph, of this section. So the oversensitivity and hypersensitivity causes one to basically distort what they're actually seeing as a way of kind of protecting themselves, if you like. But the distortion creates disillusionment, and therefore can create some suffering as well. So there's more to it than that, okay? But that's just to give you a taste of what an apex Neptune could mean if you have that in your own natal chart, but also just as an energy that was a pattern that carried through into this full moon. So not easy, right? Yeah, okay. So anyway, we've left that full moon behind us now because we've come out of that. But, you know, people will still be, I suspect, feeling, you know, the effect of that, depending on what it brought up for you. So that's the full moon in Sag, and as I said, we have a new moon in 2 weeks' time, which is going to be in Gemini, in the opposite sign that we've just had the full moon. So again, there's some theme that's coming through about communication. Now, the thing about Sag that you must understand as well, whilst it's optimistic, happy-go-lucky, generous, you know, expansive, intuitive, visionary, philosophical, really impressive on all those levels. You know, Sag's energy is all-inspiring. It's wonderful. But when it's operating at a lower frequency level, for lack of a better word, it's the person, the expression, he put his foot in his mouth. That's a Sagittarian expression. That's Sag energy. You know, there's no holding back. It's shooting the arrow, right? That shooting of the arrow is words. Other things as well, but it's also language, words that come up through the Sag energy. Now, Sagittarius is very direct. It shoots straight like the arrow, as is Aries, by the way. Well, in fact, the 3 fire signs are. So fire is very open, direct, open, honest. Problem, though, with Sagittarius is that, you know, it can overstep the mark sometimes, and it can just be over the top with some of the things that are said, and therefore there can be people left on the other side, you know, feeling quite hurt from Sagittarius's lack of boundary, you could say, consideration towards sensitivities in others and so forth. So it could be putting your foot in your mouth, to put it quite simply. So the new moon in Gemini is going to have a quincunx by Pluto, by the way. So, you know, that's the new moon is not as tricky as the full moon we've just had, but it does have a bit of a friction, awkward, kind of challenging energy because of the quincunx to Pluto. I'm sorry, forgive me, I retract that comment because I just realized that in fact the new moon is almost identical to the full moon in the sense where it is also square Neptune. Now, I realized, in fact, I've just realized that I made a comment early in the beginning of this video saying that, you know, when you're looking at the full moon or the new moon in your chart, mainly stick to looking at conjunctions and oppositions. I still stand with that. Just bear in mind, though, that the analysis I'm making at the moment with regards to the new moon or full moon is with the whole chart, as opposed to the new moon in your birth chart, right? So I'm looking at the dynamics that the new moon is carrying, or that the Sagittarius full moon was carrying. So, and I point that out because I've just said that the new moon is going to be squared by Neptune. Now, square is not a conjunction or opposition. Square is a different aspect. But point being that I'm unpacking the energies of this new moon, okay? Not as in just the new moon alone in your birth. I hope that's clear. So, quincunx from Pluto, square to Neptune, more of the same of what we just had with this full moon, to be quite frank. Because it's a square by Neptune again, and it's a quincunx, but it's come from Pluto. Which is very interesting because Saturn and Pluto, that are both transiting the sign of Capricorn, just to go a step further now, with regards to the energies, not only of this month, but you know, really basically for the next year and a bit, really, with regards to Saturn and Pluto. Saturn and Pluto, both in the sign of Capricorn, are building up. They're building up this momentum, this energy in the sign of Capricorn, and they're, you know, Pluto is further ahead than Saturn, but Saturn is eventually going to catch up with Pluto, which is in about 2020. I think the beginning of 2020, there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, and that will be the final sort of point, the full kind of energy, if you like, of what's been building prior to when they actually arrive together in the zodiac. It will also be some kind of starting point of those two planetary energies, because they come together, which is a conjunction. The conjunction is like planting a seed, a new beginning. It's a birthing of an energy, but nevertheless, while they're dancing along in the sign of Capricorn, not very far away from each other, you know, for a period of a year and a half, they're building a momentum, they're building an energy. Now, Saturn Pluto is probably one of the most difficult energies. That's how it is. So, you have a Saturn Pluto conjunction in your birth chart. To put it very simply, it's, I guess what makes it difficult is that, well, Saturn is inherently a very difficult energy that we must work with in this daily 3D reality, which is all the structures and systems and rules and regulations and, you know, all that sort of stuff, the physical, mundane world in its imperfection. And Pluto is the soul energy, and not only just the soul energy, but if it's soul energy, it's literally then connecting to pretty much every single incarnation you've had and will have. So when you've got Saturn and Pluto working together, there's something about that energy that's saying that this person is this lifetime. If you have a Saturn Pluto conjunction, you are working on soul things in such a difficult way. You can't let go. You can't just stop doing it. Saturn kind of pushes you and forces you in a way to really work through the very deep soul components of your karma and what it is you need to resolve and work through this life. Now, Saturn is always hard work. Pluto is soul work, but Saturn asking us to do soul work in this physical, mundane material, which we all do, is, you know, it's pretty pretty damn testing. So anyway, there's something about this Saturn Pluto that's building up, which is going to have, you know, clearly some collective experience, which I'm not going to talk about today because we've got some time before Saturn and Pluto get together. But I just wanted to just basically mention how with the current energies, the other feature that's there as an overlay, which is pretty very, very strong energy actually is the Saturn Pluto in Capricorn. And that Pluto is going to be quincunx the new moon on the 14th of June, which is just 2 weeks away. So Pluto's coming into this new moon and bringing in the element of an intense adjustment, something that needs to happen. Now, again, look at where this new moon lands in your own birth chart. This new moon in Gemini on the 14th of June, because wherever it lands, that's the area of life that it's going to draw in. The planet that rules the house that the new moon is in, going to add another dimension, and so forth. And of course, at the moment, you know, where the other energies that we're feeling is a solar eclipse that's coming up next month in July. So, you know, that's still 6 weeks away, but nevertheless, that energy is there as an underlayer as well. And that eclipse is going to be in Cancer, which I've touched on that a little bit already in a previous video. And again, you know, just to recap, really, it's the same message, same principle. Where is that solar eclipse landing in your birth chart? What aspects does it have to it by other planets in terms of conjunction or opposition? What are those other planets? Where are they in your birth chart? Where does the solar eclipse fall in your birth chart? That's going to give you the story, the theme of what it means for you. It's, you know, I mean, I can sit here and say, you know, this solar eclipse, it has got a very distinct message with it, according to Bernadette Brady's work, who's written a book on eclipses called The Eagle and the Lark, which I've referenced previously. So that underlying message that she offers is significant, but it's always about looking at the various kind of layers and dimensions that each transiting planet or planet in your birth chart connects to. So we don't look at something in isolation. I've said this many times, probably say it many more. So anyway, leave that eclipse alone for now. Currently, we have only 3 planets retrograde. That's enough, isn't it? Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, they're all still retrograde at the moment. And Uranus, Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Mars, and Chiron are all moving direct. So there's an intense kind of forward motion of energy action. You know, it's moving. The energy is moving quite rapidly, you could say. Venus is in Cancer, and it had an opposition to Saturn on the 26th of May. I wonder what that was, many of you. It's only, you know, it's a day transit, so it's, again, it comes down to, did that Venus opposition with Saturn, Venus-Saturn opposition trigger something in your chart? And namely to do with relationships, obviously. So when you have, and I've said this before, when you have something pretty significant take off, show up, engage you, turn your world upside down, change your world, challenge you, transform you, shift you, bring awareness, greater awareness into you, then it's not just going to be a full moon, for instance. It's not just going to be the full moon in Sag doing that, you know. And well, this is why I'm here. So if you decide to have a reading, this is how it works, right? So very specific events, when you see the story of that event unfolding in the birth chart, what appears to happen is that there'll be that story will be triggered by a number of different things, such as transits, progressions, eclipses, Fidaria periods, solar arc. Yeah, there's a number of different methods that one can use, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not as simple as it seems. You know, when you're working with astrology in the birth chart, it's multidimensional. The chart is multidimensional. There's so many layers. And when something really important happens, you can see the triggers from various different methods, various different planets and houses that are all kind of linking together and bringing the story together as a whole. It's just unbelievable, actually. It's amazing. So, for example, let's just say that I know this is a bit of a down example, but it is part of life and it is what happens, and it is what we all experience in different ways. So, the loss of somebody close to you in your life. Which I, by the way, would never ever tell anybody if they came to me for a reading. If I could see an indication of somebody close to them, if I could see the indications of in the birth chart that there's some signs there and themes and so on that all point to some kind of separation, namely death, transition, I wouldn't talk about it anyway. It's just, I don't think it's my place to do that. But I always, through the years, when I have looked at my own chart, because I've lost a few people in my life through the years, family and friends, and I've gone back and I've looked at my chart and looked at what was going on, and the symbolism is there 100% in terms of what was going on at the time. So anyway, look, it's probably not that important to unpack this right now. Perhaps I'll just do a separate video on that because I don't want to kind of leave you with something that's a bit sort of heavy and intense. I'd rather just leave that alone for now. Okay, so by the time we have the new moon, Venus will move into Leo as well. Now, Venus in Cancer is a beautiful energy. Venus in Leo is a beautiful energy too. But going back to the Venus in Cancer, as Venus continues her path through Cancer, she's going to receive an opposition by Pluto, and that happens on the 6th of June, so that's in 5 days' time. So 6th of June could be a bit heavy, a bit intense, so just keep an eye out for that. Can also be an opportunity to really go very deeply into some component of your relationship world or life, and even your finances, you could say, just to put it very broadly and simply. But something quite intense and transformational can take place on that date, on the 6th of June. Later on, as I said, Venus goes into Leo. That happens on the 14th of June. Neptune decides to go stationary retrograde on the 18th of June, so we'll have more energies going retrograde, along with Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which are currently retrograde. On the 29th of June, so the end of this month, we have the goddess Ceres, also known as Demeter, who's a very, very powerful asteroid, by the way, very, very powerful. She moves out of the sign of Leo and she moves into Virgo, and that's going to be a whole new cycle emerging as well, relating to the sign of Virgo and relating to this asteroid goddess Ceres and what she represents, which is pretty much her pathology and mythology is very much associated to grief and loss. Grief and loss is you know, one of the most painful experiences for any human being, and often a real challenge and struggle for people to understand or to articulate or to process or work through. Takes a lot of work to do that. So anyway, be interesting to see what Ceres in Virgo brings up. As it gets towards the end of the month and I do another video on the month of July, I'll bring in what Ceres in Virgo brings up, just as a general sort of sense. If you've got Ceres in Virgo yourself, or if you've got a prominent Virgo house in your chart and Ceres comes in there. So here's a good example. If you had a whole bunch of planets in the second house, which were all in Virgo, and transiting Ceres in Virgo starts to come into your second house, and she triggers off. So you had Mercury, Sun, Venus, and Pluto all in the second house. Then transiting Ceres in Virgo comes along, and she triggers off the Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and Pluto in your second house. That's going to bring up some stuff. You know, it's not going to just kind of fluff her way through. She's going to bring up some things. So look, I'll talk about Ceres in Virgo in the next video, and I think I'll leave it there because I think that's enough to kind of give you a bit of a sense of current energies, what we've just come out of, and what we're kind of moving into as well. Just before I do go, just share my screen. What did I want to look at? So here's the chart for today, and here's the energies as they stand, the planets as they stand. Oh yeah, I did want to say a few words about Mercury, you know, in Gemini. So for the next, let's just see how long before. Oh, I think I've noted it. Yeah, 13th of June, Mercury makes his way into the sign of Cancer. So we've still got about 2 weeks left before Mercury goes into Cancer. So while Mercury is in Gemini, just brings up that energy of, you know, a lot of communication, networking, connecting, sharing ideas, and so on and so forth. Quite a fast-paced sort of energy with regards to the mental, lower mental body, left brain. You know, that there might, it's just a period where there's going to be a lot more communication, sharing, exchange of ideas going on in your life, you know, between family members, friends, groups, social platforms that you're engaged in and so forth. It's a very, Mercury in Gemini is brilliant. It's just very, it's a very intelligent, quick, witty, articulate, expressive, mental energy that has really tremendous ability with communication at its sort of basic sort of level, you could say. It's Mercury, but you know, Mercury rules Gemini, so it's dignified. When Mercury is in Gemini, it's a very dignified place. So it can really, I think, when we're talking about planets being in their own signs and even just transiting, then we're talking about, you know, at the moment in the heavens, Mercury is in Gemini, so he's elated. You know, he's very, very happy to be in his own sign. It's where he thrives and does his best. So how can then Mercury, you know, benefit your life at the moment and add, you know, some sort of value of that dignified energy in your life? So again, it's looking at, well, where's Mercury transiting in your chart at the moment in Gemini? So where's Gemini in your birth chart? You see, it always comes back to where these planets are in relation to your birth chart, because your birth chart is you. To put it very simply. Okay, I'll just stop sharing that screen and I will leave it there. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I hope this video was interesting and, yeah, gave you some things to reflect on and think about. Namaste. Thank you so much. Thanks to my new subscribers and the previous subscribers. And thanks all for watching. Please leave any comments or questions below. And please feel free to contact me for a reading. You can send me an email directly. The email is in my YouTube channel information details. Thanks, guys. Bye.